wish you a warm welcome to our very first event that we're thrilled to be offering in conjunction with our friend Ann Dolin of Educational Connections. If you are new to the Arlington Schools Special Education Parent Resource Center, we're a center that's part of Arlington Public Schools that strives to support families to be sure that you have the information and support you need to partner with the wonderful staff at your children's schools to ensure that children are successful. We work a lot with families of students with disabilities like ADHD and other disabilities, but we also work a lot with families of children who, parents who just might have questions about their children. We do individual consultations to kind of help families know how to navigate school and connect with community resources. We have a lending library. We've got lots of great books, both physically at the center, you can see a little photo of on the slide, as well as new digital books. And we have new books also in English and in Spanish, and some audiobooks. We hope you'll check those out. There's a lot of resources on our website. And then finally, we offer lots of family and staff learning sessions like this. Many of them we offer that are presented by myself and my colleague, Gina, who I think might be on this call, and maybe she'll say hi in the chat. And some of them we are very fortunate to have wonderful community partners like Ann. I always love starting our year off with Ann Dolin, who is very generous with her time in sharing her wealth of knowledge and expertise with our Arlington Public Schools families. And I think, as a parent of a child who, two children who went through school, Ann's presentations were always the one that I remember leaving right away with practical tips that I could use right at home. So I'm going to go ahead and, without any further ado, turn this over with our deep gratitude to Ann Dolin, who is the founder and president of Educational Connections. Ann, thank you so much for helping us start 23-24 off in a great way.
Thanks for having me, Kathleen. It is so good to be here this evening. All right, so let me share my screen, and we will get started. All right, give me 1 second. How does that look? Awesome. I think we're all here. Well, welcome everybody. This evening we're talking about this brand new school year and some new strategies, how to help your child plan, persist, and achieve academic success in 2023 and 2024. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm your host, Ann Dolin. I'm a former special education Fairfax County Public Schools teacher. And when I was a teacher, on the side, I would drive to kids' homes and tutor kids on a one-to-one basis. And over time, I realized that was my calling in life, to work with students one-to-one. So I ended up leaving my teaching job and starting Educational Connections. And that was 25 years ago. And through the years, I've seen lots of changes in education, never so much as in the last 3 years. So tonight, I'm going to share with you some strategies that can really help in your home. And I will also share that I myself have ADHD, and both of my kids do as well. So I think it's particularly difficult to be a parent who struggles with many of these same things and also trying to help your kids along the way. So I hope that the impact I share, helps your kids, but if you struggle with these things too, can help you as well. So at the beginning of the school year, we all have so many great intentions. And our kids will even say to us things like, okay, don't worry, Mom, this year I'm going to get up on time, I promise. Or, you don't have to worry about me, Dad. I'm going to turn in all my assignments. You're not going to have to nag me. Now, on the other hand, as parents, we think this year is going to be better. We're going to be really positive. We're going to remain calm and communicate with our kids really well. We're going to try to criticize less and focus more on the positives. But the reality is that our intentions, although they are so good all the time, I think that people with ADHD are really the most optimistic group of people. We always have great intentions, but sometimes putting them into action is a whole nother story. So we see a disconnect between intention and action. And I will also tell you, in running my business for 25 years, working with lots of kids and also talking to thousands of parents on the phone, there's also this significant disconnect between what the parent wants for their child or the guardian and what the child is willing to do. So, for example, sometimes parents call our office and they say, my child's really disorganized. I really want them to be more organized. But when we talk to the child, on the other hand, that's not the top of their list. They really just want to get a couple of better grades. And so they're willing to do the work to get better grades in certain areas, but they're not always willing at first to pull out all the stops to be organized. So sometimes as educators, we have to figure out, and as parents too, what is top on our child's list, not just ours, but what is our child willing to do? And often we have to start there. So today or tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of things to help really the whole family dynamic. The first is routines, and these are really important, especially when our kids have learning disabilities, they have ADHD, or they're on the spectrum. Routines are gold. We'll talk about how to get things done, sometimes when things feel really overwhelming. We'll talk about resources within your community to make life easier. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, we'll talk about communication so that the relationship we have with our kids is the best it can be. All right, so I mentioned starting out with a routine, and it seems cliche, but I will say that routines are gold. They are so important in pairing our kids. And that's because there's something called the predictability factor, especially students on the spectrum with ADHD or learning disabilities. They always do better when they know what to expect, when they know what's coming next. You throw a wrench in a situation and it's really hard for them to adapt. So if we can have a routine for our kids, which I'll talk about in just a second, it kind of puts our kids on autopilot. They're much more willing to comply. And it makes our life easier too. So I'm going to talk about how to create routines in the house and then how to preview things with our kids. So routines can come in many different shapes and sizes. And probably the one we think of most is, when will my child get started with homework? This is a routine. And there's lots of times kids can do homework. They can do homework right after school, after about a 30-minute break, which tends to do well for elementary school students. They can do it before dinner, right after dinner, before bed, or even before school in the next morning. But ideally, we have this routine in our home where maybe it's before dinner. Before dinner, everyone gets started on their homework. That really prevents kids from staying up too late and saying they have to get something done. Often we think of homework as, okay, when should it end? But actually more valuable is, when should it start? So having that routine day in and day out of, this is about when we start, is valuable. I have found personally that schedules are really difficult. So a schedule is different. A schedule is, I'm going to start homework. My kids are going to start homework at 4:00 every day. Good luck with that. That's hard. We're all busy. We don't have the same schedule each day. So having an exact time might be difficult, but having a routine might be easier. You can also have a routine around previewing. And I personally am a huge fan of Sundays. I think they are incredibly helpful. So Sundays allow us to set up shop for the week. So maybe we have a routine of having a family dinner on Sunday, which is super helpful. We might also say after dinner, okay, everybody, let's get ready for the week. That means that for younger kids, you might be talking to them about their extracurriculars, because maybe they really don't have homework. But because we know kids do better with a routine and they know what to expect, perhaps setting a weekly calendar on the refrigerator where you say, okay, let's talk about what you have going on after school. And for each child, it's written on the calendar. They can do it, or you can do it together. So for younger kids, it should be in like a public place, like the refrigerator, and it should be done together. For older students, it might be that you're reviewing what they have coming up academically. We're going to get to that in just a second. But for the younger kids, if you want to have that weekly schedule, that weekly routine, here's a free template that you can use. And this can be printed out and put on your refrigerator. And you can get that download by going to our website, ectutoring.com/BTS, which is back to school -2023. And Melissa, I think she'll put that in the chat for you too. and you can print that out and use that. You have to change it out every week, but it's this visual reminder of what's coming up. Now, let's talk about those older students again. For older kids, it's going to be a little bit different. This is when you're going to say to your kids, okay, what do you have going on this week? Now, it could be that you just talk about extracurriculars, but for many kids, they need that reminder of, all right, what can I do on Sunday night to get ready for the week? So you might say, can you open your portal, your homework portal, and see, do you have anything big coming up this week? Do you have a big test, a quiz, a project that you can start chipping away at now? I used to always do this Sunday session with my kids. And doing like really detailed things was very hard for me, but I could do routines like this. So we'd have dinner always on Sunday night. And then I would say, okay, let's get ready for the week ahead. And it wasn't just them. I would do things like I would make my lunch. I would look at my calendar. I would confirm my appointments. We all did it together. So this one night, I'm sitting with my youngest son. I think he was a sophomore at the time. He was in high school, and he's 21 now. And he said, this is so dumb, Mom. You know what? Why do we have to do this? It doesn't help me at all. I said, okay, I get it. But just take a look at your week and just make sure you're good. It's like, fine. And so he opens up his laptop and he's looking through his calendar and he goes, oh my gosh, Mom, you have to order me Catcher in the Rye. And I said, why? And he said, because just order on Amazon right now. I have to have it for Tuesday. And I totally forgot. And so this Sunday session helps kids to think ahead to prevent things like that. You can also have a routine of being organized. And one way you can do that is having a launching pad. And this is for physical things like a backpack, binder, hockey equipment, your violin, whatever needs to go to school the next day. And again, the routine is at night, everybody gets the stuff that they need for school the next day put together and put in this bin. Now, your launching pad ideally is by the door from which you exit, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the corner of the island that's just for Jacob, or the other corner that's just for Mary. And this is where they put their stuff at night. And the idea is that you launch into a new day the next morning in an organized fashion. No more rushing around. Now, just like you do that at night, you can also kind of have a digital launching pad for tucking your devices in. And this is where everything goes to get charged overnight. So it's going to be your laptop, your earbuds, whatever it is, your case, your chargers, all these things get tucked in to their little launching pad. So the next day you are refreshed and ready to go. It sure beats realizing that you've forgotten your charger, that your laptop isn't charged, you don't have what you need for school. And when we work with kids, we often, and I'll talk about this in a little bit in terms of what executive function coaching is, but this is all part of executive function coaching. When we work with kids, we share with them, okay, here's ways to get organized. Let's set this up for you. But we'll also talk to kids about something called best friends. And best friends actually comes, she kind of like invented it, I would say, or coined the term. One of our coaches, Susan, who interestingly works with a lot of college students. And you would think by college, kids have it buttoned up. Oh, I'm going to remember my charger. I'll remember my case for my earbuds. I will have my notebook with me, but it's not always the case. So we teach kids to think about best friends. Maybe wherever your laptop goes, your notebook goes. They should always be together. They're best friends. It could be your laptop is always best friends with your charger. They always go together. It could be your earbuds with the case. You need to charge them. There's lots of things, your phone, your charger, your iPad, your charger, your backpack, your lunch, your backpack, your water bottle. So anytime kids can think of things together in pairs as best friends, it really helps them to get organized. All right, so question, what have you taken away so far? Could anything be useful to you? You don't have to respond, but just think about it. Think, is there one thing that maybe I might try in my home? So we've talked about routines. We've talked about physical organization. things like tucking in our digital devices and best friends. But let's talk about actually doing the work and getting things done, because this is often where our kids have difficulty. So when we first think about, okay, how do I ensure my kids get things done? We want to think, all right, where are they going to do it? And what place in my house is most conducive to attention and learning? Well, we call this the homework hotspot. And your homework hotspot is the place you're going to do your work. It's different for every kid. Some kids do well in the hum of a busy area, like the kitchen table. Some kids need a quieter area. I would say that in general, kids in elementary school, I wouldn't put them in too quiet an area, like their bedroom, or maybe on the second floor in a guest room that you have a desk up there. They may need a little bit more oversight. But older kids, they might be okay in those situations. In general, for younger kids, you kind of want them in earshot of you. And for older kids, what I will say is that since COVID, or I would say before COVID, kids kind of had their homework hotspot. But during COVID, their homework hotspot kind of migrated to their bedroom and then to their bed and then under their blankets. And so we see that still happening, that kids are doing work on their bed. And that isn't really conducive for focus. So if there's a desk in their room, make sure that it's set up and it's cleared off, that they can do their work there, if that's helpful. Also, the homework hotspot shouldn't be in the midst of digital distractions. We want to ditch those. So our homework hotspot shouldn't be where the TV is on, right there, because that would be distracting. Ideally, our homework hotspot has an area for your phone that isn't sitting next to you. So it could be that your phone is on the other side of the room. Or if your child's insistent on their phone, maybe say, could you turn it over? Maybe you don't need to see everything that's coming on the screen. Just flip it over. And that is a way to ditch some of those digital distractions. We also want to have a guardian game plan. We want to know what to do as parents and as guardians. How can we ensure that our kids know what they're doing and can get stuff done? Well, first, we want to make sure that they're able to get started. We may ask the question, oh, tell me what you have going on today. What's the one thing you want to get done? Or what's your biggest priority? And sometimes kids need help getting started. They might say, I got it. And if that's the case and they're generally independent, great, they have it. But if you see often that your child is having difficulty getting started, doesn't always know what to do, seems frustrated at the start, that's when you might want to check in and make sure they understand how to do the first few problems. And then that's when you go into another room or you walk away. Again, for younger kids, be within earshot. But in general, for all kids, we don't want to worry about quality, which feels kind of counterintuitive, but we really want to be about completion. Really just encouraging our kids to get the work done. What I found over the years is that if we're always focused on the quality, that means like, did you spell every word right? Do you have enough adjectives in these sentences? Did you write every step out for your algebra problems? Those are things that just invite power struggles. And if you think you might be in a power struggle with your child, you already are in a power struggle and you have to disengage. So the goal is not to get into the power struggle in the first place. And you can do that by really avoiding the question of quality and really just encouraging kids to get it done. Now, if you're in the moment though, and you are trying to help your child with homework and they're frustrated, you really have three choices, because kids get stuck all the time on their work. And this is really normal. Now, you could say to your child, let's say they don't know how to do a math problem. Listen, Susie, this is your homework, not mine. I already went to 6th grade. You do this, I'm out of here. That's not always a good idea, because we want our kids to feel like they can come to us. And honestly, not just about homework, but about other things later in life. Issues with friends, for example, we want to be there for them. So we don't want to push them away too far. But on the other hand, we don't want to always be too involved and say, let me show you. This is how you do it. This is what you need to do. Because inevitably your child will say, I'm sorry, but that's not how Mrs. Anderson said to do it in class. It never is. But the last option is really the best one. And that's when you say, do you have examples of this in your notes or your book? Are there sample problems online? Did you write this down before? Where can you find information on this? That's really the best situation, because then you're leading your child back to that source and trying to find information out so that they can work a little bit more independently. Also, there are so many resources, and being in Arlington County, which is such an amazing place with resources, there's lots of things kids can do. Many times, depending on the school, they may have a period built into their day where they can go talk to their teacher. They may have access to a peer study group. They have the Parent Resource Center and Kathleen. Kathleen and her team are a host of such valuable, good information to help you along the way. There's always the teacher after school that your child can seek out. It could be that you hire a college student down the street privately. It could be that you hire a professional, which is what we do. But what I'd say is to avoid these power struggles, and if you feel like this has been happening year over year, it is likely to happen again this year. And so that's why finding somebody else who's a resource, who doesn't have an emotional history with your child, is really ideal. And one of the best people to go to for that is your teacher. If you're experiencing issues at home with homework, I would encourage you to reach out to him or her early on. Don't wait till it's a boiling point. And I will also say, using the words "I've noticed" is so helpful. As a teacher, I had all kinds of conversations with parents. And sometimes parents came at me with guns blazing. They were really upset about something. And I will say it kind of like put me on the defensive. But when parents approached me and they were telling me what happened at home, I totally got it. And I wanted to problem solve with them. And you can do that by using the words "I've noticed." Oh, I've noticed Jimmy's really struggling with math, especially equations. Have you seen that in class too? Do you have strategies? I've noticed Sarah is missing 3 assignments in biology. What are you seeing in the classroom? Sometimes what's on the portal isn't always accurate. It hasn't been graded yet. So asking a teacher about it can be helpful, and you're just observing what you're seeing. And again, if we can approach teachers sooner rather than later, that's helpful. But teachers, just like other folks, don't have that emotional attachment, as I mentioned. They don't have a history with your child. So they're far less likely to get into these avoidable power struggles with kids. We see that all the time, and parents call our office every day looking for help for their kids. And sometimes what they want and what the child wants, as I said in the beginning, is a little bit different. So our goal, we have this inventory that we give kids in the beginning to figure out what their pain points are and what they're willing to work on first. And that's where we always start, because we can always get around the back door and help with things like organization later on, but we may not start with that. But parents often say after we're working with kids for a while, "Oh my God, it's so amazing. You got her to do that. She wouldn't do that for me." Or, "I said the same thing and he wouldn't listen to me." And it's all part of being a parent. Our kids are always willing to listen to somebody else a little bit more. So when we work with kids as an executive function coach, and you may have heard this term before, and those are people, professionals that specifically work on executive function skills. And if you're not familiar with this term, it has to do with things like being organized, planning, understanding time, being able to estimate time well, basically, executive functions are fancy words for good study habits. And many kids, I should say all kids with ADHD do not have good executive function skills. And many kids with learning disabilities, even if they don't have an ADHD diagnosis, will struggle with these things. And it's easy to think that when kids are disorganized or they procrastinate, that it's a willful behavior, but it's not. It's really that it's hard for them. And when these skills are hard for them, they need to be directly taught an easier way to manage these things. So when we work with kids as executive function coaches, we want to be sure that not only are we teaching kids the skills that they need, but that their work isn't falling through the cracks. So the first thing we do is we go through the child's portal with them. So their portal might be, it could be a Canvas, it could be Google Classroom, it could be Blackboard, whatever the portal is where in their school district. And we help them look at each class and figure out, all right, what do I have in this class? What are the assignments that I have coming up right away? And then what's due later on? And we do this because we found, and we've honed this over many years, that if we don't do this regularly with kids and teach them this routine of doing it on their own, things fall through the cracks and they start missing assignments. And so we go through each class with them. We have them click on it. We do this virtually, by the way, and it works out great. And so they can see what's going on in each class. And then we help them to record their assignments. Now, for most kids, this is through the calendar, their online calendar. So in most districts, when teachers assign something, it will populate into their calendar. Not all teachers do it like this. So sometimes these assignments, like test on Friday, essay due on Thursday, will populate in their calendar, but sometimes they don't. So that's our job with the student, is to figure out what they have and help them put it in the calendar. And probably even more important is not just the due date, but all right, so you do have that essay on Thursday. How are you going to get that done on Thursday? What are the little tasks you're going to do leading up to that completion? And let's put this on your calendar together. This is a skill called calendaring. And when we do this with kids, and you can talk to your kids about this term too, we use weird windows. So we're constantly, especially busy kids. So many of these kids play sports. They're into this, they're into that. And they have very little time to manage. And so we're looking through their calendar with them and looking at their extracurriculars as well and figuring out, all right, where are your weird windows? Where are these pockets of time? And it might be something simple like you're waiting at your allergist on Tuesday for a half hour, or there's an hour before you go to soccer practice on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Or you have this time when you get back from soccer, but before you have a French lesson where you have time to get something done. So we call these weird windows, and there are times that kids, there are smaller amounts of times that they may be doing something else, like scrolling through Instagram. So we identify those and help them put those tasks into their weird windows. And I tell you, this is empowering, because now it's not like, okay, I got to do that thing, but now it's like, okay, I got to do this exact thing, and now I know when to do it. And I feel better because I'm getting most of my things done before it's too late at night. And then the third thing is to complete the assignments. So we'll figure out, all right, what's heaviest on your mind? What assignment is the hardest for you? Let's start there. And we'll teach kids ways to overcome something that feels difficult and get that done. So they feel like it's not just this, plan, but now they have actionable things. They've actually gotten some work done. And I will tell you, probably my favorite part of working with kids is the last part of the session. And this is when we help them anticipate obstacles. So we'll say, all right, so you have this essay on Thursday that's due, and writing's difficult. Now, you put these little tasks on Tuesday and Wednesday. What could get in your way of getting them done? And we'll hear all kinds of things like, oh, I've got a lacrosse banquet on Wednesday night, or I'm like so binge watching this show on Netflix, or I don't know, sometimes go down the rabbit hole of text messages with my friends. So these are obstacles, and we want to know what they are before they happen. Because if we can help kids anticipate the obstacle, then they're able to deal with it when it comes up. And this is often where kids with learning issues and ADHD fall down. They're really optimistic. They think nothing will go wrong, but I promise you, it always does. So we might teach them things like tricking their brain. And we say to them, like, I totally get it. You know, you have this essay to do, writing's difficult. And you also like Instagram. So if your brain has the choice between writing this essay and scrolling through photos on Instagram and liking them, your brain is always going to pick Instagram. It's not your fault. This is just like what your brain naturally does because your brain likes easy, passive things. Okay, so we're going to have to trick your brain. Let's figure out ways to do that. Could these things work? Here's a couple of suggestions we often use with kids, and you can mention these too. So the first is tolerable 10. I believe that kids need a timer at the place, at their homework hotspot. Ideally, it's a physical timer and not on their phone. Here's an example of one I like. This is called the time timer. And you can get them really little. There's big ones too. Don't order the big ones. They're too large, but these little ones are fine. And you always want to teach kids, or we teach kids, to set it for a super short amount of time. And we say, look, you want to do Instagram, but you have to tell your brain that this is not going to be that hard after all. Let's set it just for 10 minutes. Call this a tolerable 10. Anybody can do anything and tolerate anything for 10 minutes. Work as hard as you can, as best as you can. And then after 10 minutes, you can take a quick break. Now, for older kids that need to get more work done, they need longer swaths of time. There's a method called the Pomodoro technique. And this was developed in the 80s by an Italian researcher. It's actually really famous. And he looked at all kinds of time. For example, when you're working independently, what is the amount of time that your brain can focus best? Is it 10 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 90 minutes, 45 minutes? Like, what is it? It turns out it's 25 minutes. And so the idea is that you set a timer for 25 minutes and you say the same mantra. I'm going to work as hard as I can, best as I can, just for 25 minutes. And then I take a 5-minute break afterwards. So you work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. And if you're able, you can set the timer again for 25 minutes. But what we do know is that and this is for older students, really, once doing multiple Pomodoros. Younger kids can do one, but older kids, even adults, your brain can only tolerate 4 Pomodoros. So here's how it looks. Pomodoro, break, 5 minutes, Pomodoro, break, Pomodoro, break, Pomodoro, and that's the max. Most kids, however, 1, 2, maybe 3. So those are just some suggestions on how to tackle it, and that's how we go about it. Now, within getting work done, as parents, we also want to make sure that we're not being the homework police. And that is so easy to do. Why? Because we're all worried about our kids. It's just human nature. It's who we are. You are on this webinar tonight because you care. And when we see our kids struggling, it's just so hard. It's like a dagger in the heart. And they feel it too. I call this the doom loop. Our kids get a bad grade. And what happens when you get a bad grade? Well, there's criticism. Might be from parents. It could be from the teacher. It could be maybe they need to keep a certain GPA to be on a sports team. So they get criticism. And when you're getting a lot of criticism, your confidence tanks. You have lower confidence. And when you don't have a ton of confidence, you're going to put forth reduced effort. And we all know if you're not putting forth a lot of effort, you're going to get another bad grade. And it just stinks. And we don't want our kids to be into this doom loop. This doom loop doesn't end unless we take action. And so we want to help our kids break free of the doom loop. And we can do that by really thinking about how we're going to respond to them. So as parents and as coaches too, we try to really refrain from the words, the whys and the did yous. So why? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you go see your teacher like I told you to? Did you do that algebra? Did you go make up that test? Did you turn that in yet? That type of language and questioning keeps kids in the doom loop. It keeps kids, it feels like criticism to them, even though we could mean well. So instead, when we work with kids, we always want to change things up and use positive communication. We can talk about that in a second. Because when we do this, it's a game changer. And to start, we want to set up that time to talk. So we never want to talk to our kids when they're upset about something. Like there is no winner when our kids are upset and when we're upset as parents. When we're educators or coaches working with kids, if the kid is really, really upset about something, we'll talk about it. But we're able to do that a little bit differently because we don't have that emotional history with the students. So sometimes they're more willing to open up. But as a parent, if you're feeling distressed, don't talk to kids in the moment. Set aside a time and say, hey, let's talk about this at 7:30 after dinner when everybody's a little bit calmer. And here are these words again, I've noticed. So instead of saying, hey, I saw on the portal you're missing 5 math assignments, and what the heck, it's only September. Like that doesn't feel good to kids. Instead, just say what you're observing. Hey, I've noticed it's hard to stay on top of your math homework. Or if it's specific, I noticed equations are really hard. Tell me about that. And this is key. We're not seeking to judge our kids in this conversation. All we want to do is have them tell us what's going on. We just really want to have a very calm conversation without judgment. So we might say, tell me about that. And we listen, we nod, and we empathize. And we might hear things like, this is so dumb. I'm never going to use the Pythagorean theorem in my life. Why do I have to know this? And you can say, you're right. I get it. That's true. I'm not sure when you're going to have to use that exact theorem. And math can be hard. So we want to empathize with our students and nod and tell them we get it. We also can have open-ended conversations. If kids are distressed, we can say, tell me more about that. Or if they say something that you're thinking, is that accurate? You might say, oh, interesting. What makes you say that? Or tell me more. When we work with kids, we often, before we introduce a strategy, we'll say, hey, I'm thinking of this strategy. It might work for you. It might not. Or, oh, can I show you this? We show it to them. What do you think of this strategy? So a lot of times it's all in the delivery. And if you want, I created this handout, which I love. This is my favorite handout about how to have open-ended conversation with kids. You can get at that on ectutoring.com/BTS for back to school 2023. So ultimately, we want to strengthen our connections with kids. We don't want to start with those did you questions. When we work with students, we want to normalize it, and you can too as a parent. You're right. 7th grade is hard for a lot of kids. We empathize and we do these things because if kids feel like we're a team, they're more likely to be independent and do it on their own than if they feel micromanaged. They're more likely to feel empowered to co-own the situation. We're having an ADHD summit for parents the week of September 11th, by the way. And one of our presenters, Michelle Mullally, is talking about parenting kids with ADHD. And I got this technique from her. She's going to share this with you. And when she shared it with me, I thought, this is so great. I have to include it because I really like it. We often hear of like, oh, when you're giving feedback to kids, it should kind of be like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'll say something positive, then something negative, and then something positive again. But my experience has been that totally doesn't work with kids. They see right through it. They know that this is your MO, that you're going to knock them down with something bad. But what Michelle says is that actually kids with learning difficulties and ADHD are a little bit more sensitive than the general population. And because they often get more negative feedback, for every one thing that we want to say to them, like, it could be anything about homework. I saw that you have a math assignment coming up, and it's going to maybe feel to them like it's a little bit negative. You want to toggle that with 3 positive comments. And it could be a pat on the back. It could be, I love you. It could be, I like the way you got started. I can tell you're working really hard on that. So that's a 3-to-1 ratio. And as parents, we can also keep ourselves in check, even when we're feeling like so anxious about our kids and worried about their future. And we want to ask those did you questions and why didn't you do this questions. We may kind of want to compartmentalize that and have nag-free time zones for our kids. So we may say to ourselves, okay, between 4 and 7, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to ask about academics. And that means if you do have dinner with your child, that maybe this is a time where you don't talk about anything school. And this is a time where it's just, how was your day? How are you feeling? Tell me about recess. Tell me about something that's positive and not about grades. And it could be in the car, but these are times that we're more likely to have more positive communications with our kids if we're not talking about something that feels heavy. Because at the end of the day, we want to think what our future will look like with our kids. We don't want to think, oh, I shouldn't have nagged so much. We want to say, oh, I had a great relationship with my child. That's really where it's at. Because I tell you, kids are not going to remember what they got the first quarter in 7th grade history, what their grade was. But they will remember our relationship with us as parents. And so as parents, we want to think of, wouldn't it be great if we could have this relationship? And if our relationship wasn't defined by academics. So if we can help you get down that path and make the school year a little bit better for your child with an executive function coach, a tutor, whatever, we're happy to help you. And you can scan this QR code and it will give you information on our programs. And you can talk to one of our amazing program managers, Kathy, Jennifer, and Ann Stewart. They all work with a lot of our families that have 504s, IEPs, or their kids need a little bit bigger boost in school, not because they're not bright, but because they could use a little bit of help with executive functions. And then this is the conference that I mentioned. It's all virtual. It's our summit, I should say. Opening the door to learning for students with ADHD. It's coming soon, the week of the 11th, and it's daily from 1 to 2. So we have Michelle on parenting, Dr. Robert Brooks on motivation, Cliff Sussman on digital addiction, Kristen Landis on college for kids with learning disabilities and ADHD, and then Kathy on organization and study habits for kids with ADHD. So I would love to go to questions now. And Kathleen, thank you so much for having me. If it's okay with you, I'm going to go to the chat and see what we have on tap. Does that sound good?
That sounds great, Ann. And thank you so much. I don't know how you pack all of these gems into such a short amount of time, but they're so, so helpful. I was taking notes for my young adult kids.
Aw, well, thanks for that. I feel like I spoke too fast. I hope that's okay. I was thinking the same thing, like, oh, wow, I got caught up in so many strategies. So let's see what parents have to say. So Amanda says, how can I get my 9th grader caught up on math? He feels like he's been behind since 6th grade. He's in Algebra 1 now, but still doesn't know basic multiplication facts. He feels overwhelmed and won't advocate for himself in class. He's too nervous to ask questions. All right, so Amanda, this is what I would do as a parent. I would talk to the teacher. I would absolutely say, this is what you've noticed at home, that he's struggling with the basics. But I would probably get a math workbook, and if he's willing, every morning before he goes to school, just for 5 or 10 minutes, or in the evenings, whenever you have time, have him work through the automaticity of facts. Even though some people will say, oh, it's fine if you don't know your facts. It's not fine. because as you get older, you need to be automatic. When you're thinking about solving algebraic equations, fractions, decimals, and percents are the foundation. And if you don't know basic math facts, it's really hard for you to master those three skills. So I would start out spending 5 or 10 minutes, and you can get math workbooks that are just multiplication. And that's where I would start. And even if he's a little bit resistant, it's okay. Say, let's just work on 5s today. Let's work on 4s, and break it down so that he's just working on one type of fact until he masters those. So what I found to work really well with kids is you start with 5s, you teach 2s, you go to 9s, because there's a big trick for 9s, which you can find in a math workbook. And 9s are easy for kids. And then you can fill it in with all the other facts. But I would start there. And it's likely that you may have to do some of this yourself, but you could also get a tutor. And I would recommend that, because it will just get harder as he goes along. So I hope that's helpful. I am looking for strategies to help my 4th grade son who has ADHD and dysgraphia. And I will say, Lauren, that is so, so common. Most kids with ADHD do have difficulty with writing, and dysgraphia is like a fancy term for like getting what's in your brain out through pencil and paper or typing it. And the reason this is so hard for kids with ADHD is that it takes a ton of working memory to write. And working memory actually isn't your short-term memory. It's not your long-term memory. It's what you can hold in your head at one time to do something. So like an example would be, you say to your child, hey, go up in your room and put your coat on, get your gloves, and don't forget to brush your teeth. Chances are your kid is going to come down with his gloves, but he doesn't have his coat and he hasn't brushed his teeth. It's because working memory is an issue, juggling those things. When you're writing, your working memory is, okay, what do I want to say? Do I have a capital letter? Did I spell those words correctly? Do I have proper punctuation? Do I have enough vocabulary words? Is this going to make sense? So that's why kids with ADHD have difficulty with writing. And so I would talk to the teacher about it and let her know what you're seeing and ask, could something be modified for home to make it a little bit easier? Because it could be, if it's that painful, it may be that the expectations, even if they seem basic to us, at that moment in time might be too high for your child. All right. I'd like to get my 5th grader organized from Krista. So she's ready to be, so she's good to go in middle school. And Krista, what I would say is middle school is such a hard time because kids are finding their identity. They don't want to talk to us. You know, it's such a tough time. But if we can get these routines in place, I think they're just so much better off for it. So I would do the routine of the launching pad. The physical launching pad, tucking in the devices at night. I would start that now. I would have that after school routine of when to get started for homework. And I would make sure that when your child gets started on homework, she doesn't just start with math or English or science or history. She starts with a little game plan. And that's one of the best things we can teach our kids that are going off to middle school that have a lot of things to juggle is, before you begin, you need to have a game plan of what you're going to do. And we do that stuff with kids all day long because their intuition is, I'm just going to just start on something. And you don't want to do that. You want to have a game plan. All right, let's see. My 9th grader wants to achieve academically, but doesn't want to do the rigorous work or attempt the organizational skills. And Jenny, I get it. My oldest son was like that too. And he's 25 now. And I remember one day I came home from work and he's sitting on the couch and he has a calculator out, but he doesn't have any math assignment. He has nothing else out. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And he says, I'm figuring out what the lowest grade I could possibly get on this test is and still get a B in math. And he was so strategic. He just wanted to figure out how he could game the system without having to work hard. And it crushed me, as a parent, like, but this is what I do for a living. I want you to care more. But sometimes our kids will, put forth the bare minimum. And it's not until things matter to them a little bit more that they kind of see the end game. They're not quite mature enough to see how their actions reflect on their future outcome. And so for that reason, sometimes it is time that helps. I know that's not something parents want to hear, but sometimes it's somebody else that helps. It's somebody else that is more like, like maybe it's an executive function coach who's kind of also a mentor, who the child is willing to work with, and they develop a relationship, and the student is willing to work harder for that kid, for that person. We see this all the time. Kids come to us not feeling great about school, they're lacking motivation, and once they develop that relationship and they get a little bit more mature, things really start to click for them. All right, let me take this off screen share. All right, so let's see, what other questions do we have? Hold on. Any recommendations for a fourth grader with ADHD who has a new IEP, but a lot of negative baggage? Every night at dinner, all 5 of us have to share 2 positive things about school or work, which have been fantastic. And I'm learning more about this for my I'm learning more about my 7th grader. Great. Yes. So for your 4th grader, I'm so glad that he has a new IEP. He's starting the year well. And I love that idea of sharing 2 things. I think that's great. And Lauren, I don't think you had a question. I think you were just sharing that with the group. I love that idea. Share 2 positive things. Even if it's about recess and what they ate for lunch, those things are okay. When my kids were little, I used to do rose and thorn with them. And I'd say, because every rose has a thorn. So what was your rose today? What was like the best thing that happened to you? And what was the thing that didn't feel so great? Or maybe it was your obstacle. And it's funny, I was, this was maybe about a year ago, but my youngest son was the president of his pledge class of his fraternity in college. And he's like, Mom, I had all these kids are in my pledge class, and I had to think of an icebreaker, and I didn't know what to do, so I did rose and thorn. And I thought that was adorable that he still did it all these years. So I love that, Lauren. Anything we can do to get our kids talking is just so key. Thank you for that. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Let me go back. We use the timer. It actually stresses out my daughter. And I totally hear you, Mary. Timers sometimes do not work for kids. If your child is stressed out by the timer, I wouldn't use it. You can help your kids to break things down 2 ways: by time, which would be the timer, or by task. And task is a substitute for that. So task would be, okay, just do the first 5 problems on this worksheet, or do every other problem, or take the worksheet, fold it in half, and just do the top. Or if it's an online version, just open up the document and do the first 2, or write your name on it and do the topic sentence. That's another way you can break something down to make it easier without using a timer. Let's say Mary says it's a challenge with older kids to balance being involved in their schoolwork, and also someone who said you have to be more hands-off so they can learn responsibility and manage their own work. At what age should parents stop being involved so much? It's hard to know what's too much and what's not, what's okay. And I would say, if your child has ADHD or a learning disability, sometimes people don't want to hear this, but you're just going to have to be a little bit more involved for a little bit longer, because they don't always mature like a typical student. So we often see, and this is well documented in the research, that some students are about 3 years behind when it comes to maturity. And so if you think of, should you still be helping a 12-year-old? Maybe not. But if the student's more like a 9-year-old, which is a 4th grader, would you still help a 4th grader? Chances are you would. So maybe think, do that math a little bit and think, would you help a younger student? And for some kids, they may just need more help, but you can wean yourself from that by helping them to get started, and that's it. You can check in with them. You can set up designated check-in times. Okay, it's 5 o'clock now. Let's check in at 5:30 or 5:45. Or I'm going to be in my office doing email. Come get me if you need help. Those things are better than hovering too much. So another thing you could do is, if you feel like you're over helping, have that conversation. Say, I feel like I'm over helping. What do you think? What if we did things differently? And, sometimes parents get frustrated and they'll say, I'm just not going to help anymore. But you don't want to stop cold turkey. You want to have a conversation and have a discussion of how you could step back and give the child a little bit more responsibility. So I hope this is helpful. Somebody said, I noticed there's a lag between parent view portal and the accomplishments. And Richard, we see that all the time. Sometimes parents will say, my child hasn't done all of these things. And then the child will say, actually, I have. They just haven't been graded, or the grade hasn't been uploaded yet. And so, I would say, instead of checking the portal on your own, if you have a tendency to do that, maybe check it with your child. So set a time each week for 10 minutes. Hey, let's check in. How are you doing? And instead of saying, why didn't you do this? Just say, can you tell me a little bit about this assignment? And try to have a conversation as to what's going on. And then reach out to the teacher. If you find that this has been going on for a long time and there's still a lot of missing work, that's when I might reach out to the teacher to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. Let's see. Dana said, I think with older kids, it's nice to model things and show them what you need to do. And that's what I do. She said, this is part of the routine. And they might even start to initiate it. It's kind of like scaffolding. I love that, Dana. We all kind of do these things naturally. We all might on Sunday night kind of get ready for our week. Maybe if we go to an office, we lay out our clothes or little things and we kind of keep them to ourselves. But I like that idea of scaffolding and talking to our kids about it and sharing what we do. That's a great idea. All right. So let's see. I think there's a couple of questions that I didn't get to, but I'm so sorry. We're out of time. Sorry. Jeffrey says, how do we get the school not to change the routine? Jeffrey, I wish I had an answer to that. I will defer to Kathleen, but I think that might be a bigger issue that perhaps talk to the teacher about. But teachers, I know, feel so stressed right now, and they want to have routines, but talk to him or her about it and see if there's another way you can get that information. Kathleen, what do you think about talking to the teacher about routines?
I think always good communication can help. I also often encourage parents, start a little homework journal yourself. Like if you're noticing your child is struggling with a certain topic, or you're needing to help a lot, or you feel like you're reteaching it, just keep a little notebook so that this way, when you have your parent-teacher conference, you can say, gee, most of the time when my student comes home, they're not able to do this homework independently, because sometimes teachers don't know that. So and I think trying to have consistent routines is very helpful for everybody, for staff and parents and students. So I agree, and having that conversation can be very beneficial. All right, well, Anne, we hope you'll think about maybe coming back and joining us again this year at some point. And I'm so grateful for all these great strategies. And I think that sentiment was shared many times over in the comments. So we are so grateful for your partnership and for your generosity with all your resources and for helping us get the year off to a great start.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. It was a pleasure to be here. And I believe a survey will pop up as we exit. So if you wouldn't mind taking time to share with us what you liked, what was helpful, that would be amazing. Thanks, everybody. I wish you all the best this school year. Have a great evening. Good night.
Good night.